again, everybody. Welcome to this week's episode of Freeform Friday, recorded on a Tuesday of all days. So, we got an amazing lineup for you, one unlike any other. So, of course, we got, I'm back on another platform. Let's see how this works out. I got Alan Greenberg and our esteemed guest, the son of handsome Harley Race, Justin Race, hopefully joining us real soon. So this is what we got going on. We're going to talk about Justin's memories, his recollections of growing up in a wrestling family. And Alan is going to be here with us too. What's going on, sir? Glad you could be here. How are you, Alan? Oh, you're still trying to set stuff up? That's okay. Can you hear me? Can you see me? Can you feel me? Yes. Hello, Alan. What's going on, my friend? How are you? Oh, and we already lost him, but we got him back. Alan, can you hear me? Can you see me? How are you? Hold on a second. No. Oh. I knew we'd run into technical difficulties. I knew we would. So what we always do when we try to do new technology. New technology will kill us all. Alan, if you can hear me, are you ready to go? Oh, I take it you can't hear me. Okay. All right. Let me try again. Alan, are things better now? Can you hear me? Can you see me? I take it no. I take it you're unable to. Oh, boy. We're off to a good start, boys and girls. We're off to a great start. We're off to a terrible start, I should say. Oh, my God. Hold on a second. Alan, can you see or hear me, or are we having additional technical issues? I can hear things on your end, but are things good?
They just became good right now. Can you hear me?
Yes. Huzzah! Huzzah!
I just readjusted some settings, and apparently we is on to the break of dawn.
All right, so we're waiting for the guest of honor. We're waiting for Justin Race to join us.
Yes.
And we're waiting for that. Of course, Justin advised us that he had to take his mother to the doctor. And of course, Justin has a book coming out. Oh, Justin is about to join us.
All right.
Whoa.
Hey, what's going on, my friend? Justin, thank you so much for joining us. How are you, sir?
I'm doing very well. How are you doing?
Fantastic. I'm so glad that this whole thing is working out for the time being.
Yeah, really. You never know. hold on, let me get personal. No. And I'm trying to get, I can see everyone here. Can you hear me?
Yeah,
I
I
can
can
hear
hear
you.
you. But this is a private recording because we're not streaming live as of yet. This
Yeah.
episode, as being recorded on a Tuesday, will drop on a Friday. Because
Okay.
the reason being is because I cannot stand people chiming in with stupid random comments. I'd rather keep it private and then you chime in later, which is what I
Oh, I
which is
got,
why
yeah.
I do what I do.
I hear what you're saying.
All right. So
Oh, that was weird.
here's the thing, Alan. Uh, of course, Justin and I
Yes.
barely know each other, but I think it would be of utter importance that you introduce yourself to Mr. Race. Of course, Alan, you're a very big fan of one Mr. Harley Race,
No,
father of
no.
Justin Race, and I
Well,
mean, your
yeah, it's a
Tell me
great.
when we start
your
recording.
questions were magnificent, but we've got to talk about, we got to ad lib, we got to pivot. But Alan, please
Yeah.
introduce yourself to Mr. Race and tell us a bit about yourself. I know all about you, and I know what you've been doing for the last many, many years in the world of professional wrestling. I've got schooled into that in the world of 3 years knowing you. The
No, thank
floor
you.
is yours, Alan.
Yeah, no, it is an absolute great honor and a privilege to meet you, Mr. Race. Some of my greatest joys as a child was heading down to the basement to be alone to watch your dad on my television screen in 1986, and I've been doing so ever since. So,
That's
uh,
awesome.
yeah, 38 years of just incredible admiration and respect for
Watching,
who the man was, what he accomplished, and what a great
watching that
honor to
guy,
meet you. What's that?
watching that guy.
I can't really see because you're small. Yeah, I think that's the
I
guy. I
know
can
I can't
barely
get
see.
the screens all equal either. I've got
Yeah,
Dave. David is huge, and then you're very small.
yeah.
Well,
Same here with you. Yeah, but David's the big man on campus, I suppose, today. But that's all
Oh
right. But you're
yeah,
the big man.
yeah. We got to
God
listen to
damn,
him.
why isn't the big bastard over?
That's it. And from those first 5 years, I became so in love with the behind the scenes world of pro wrestling that I decided to launch my own pro wrestling newsletter in '91, and I ran it for 15 years. I wound up promoting some independent shows along the way, and I followed your father's career. I mean, I started back watching it by the late '80s into the '70s, and etc. And and all that. So I really was just the idea of being able to have this chat with you is a great honor and a privilege.
Oh well, pleasure. The pleasure and the honor are all mine, man. I wasn't for you guys, I wouldn't have anybody to talk about.
Well, we're always happy to talk about the wondrous world of professional wrestling, past, present, and future. But we more or less focus on the past. Of course, this week's episode of Freeform Friday, I know all y'all, you expect me to talk about what went down at SummerSlam or Summer Scam 2024, or
Well, not Justin and I. I don't know what the viewers expect.
Oh,
I
well,
sure as hell hope they don't expect it because I don't want to talk about it. You
Well,
watch it and
Justin's
you be the
dad,
critic.
yeah. I mean, look,
yeah.
Justin's dad. Sorry.
No, I was just gonna say, yeah, he was around long before that stuff, and
And he
well, I
always
guess you could
maintained.
say he kind of started and brought that kind of stuff into the business.
Yeah, he did, and he always maintained it was a sport to him. So it's not really presented very much as, except for obviously the amazing athletics, but it's sort of presented as performance art rather than sport, as your father always,
Yeah,
you know.
unfortunately, they my dad at his wrestling school, he used to tell me before he even started the school, or I don't know when things kind of changed. He'd say, "Yeah, I used to wrestle an hour every night. Now it takes him 20 minutes to get to the mat for a 12-minute match." And so the motto of his wrestling school was "Shut up and wrestle."
Ah, yes, yeah, exactly, and that's it. I mean, it's all focused obviously on television now, but I mean, how many of our viewers, David, know that Justin's dad was once known as Jack Long or the Great Mortimer, or before he was handsome, before he was the king, before he was a
Nobody.
wow. That's why we're
Nobody.
here. Right? That's why
Well,
we're here. I mean,
when he first broke into the business, he wrestled under several. He even wore a mask. Can you believe that?
wow.
And
Mm.
one time his father, my grandpa Jay, sat him down and said, "Why would you want to make a name for someone else?" And so he wrestled under Harley Race forever after that, either Handsome or the King. But he was just Harley Race, which Harley Race, someone pointed out to me today, somebody on uh, Facebook or something. Harley Race is a very cool wrestling name, and it's his own.
Oh, it's a perfect name for wrestling. That's what, and it's his own. Exactly. No gussying up needed. It's a perfect name for wrestling, and exactly why does he need to hide it? It's a perfect name to flaunt, and Harley Race and Larry Hennig. I mean, the Axe, and that was just such a perfect team. Back in the day. Uh,
The pretty
just
boys,
being
Handsome and Pretty Boy.
yeah, exactly. And it was just too awesome. And exactly, Harley being himself was all that was needed for sure.
Yeah, he did his talking in the ring.
Absolutely.
Well, he did some good
Absolutely.
promos too, but he did a lot of talking in the
Right.
ring.
Absolutely.
He didn't never had a gimmick. I mean, after all that goofiness of when he first broke into business. And the King, I've always thought that McMahon did Dad kind of a favor, kind of actually gave him an honor, and I don't think it was intentional at the time. I mean, when they first started negotiating him coming to WWE, he told Vince flat out, "I don't want your world chat title. I've had plenty of world titles. I don't need your intercontinental title or US. I don't want any titles or anything like this. So we're gonna have to come up with something else." Well, Vince came up with the King and the King of the Ring. What he didn't, I think, realize is rather than it just being the winner of a tournament, it turned my father into the king of wrestling. And all the guys, all my life, from when I can remember, he was never addressed as Harley. It was either Mr. Race or the boss. And that includes the guys nowadays. I was just with Randy Orton not long ago, and he mentioned something about my dad. I said, "Yeah, Mr. Race told me that."
the
Um, but
son of the son of
but
Mr. Orton told you, Mr. Race.
yeah, well, no, he was talking about something in a story. And he said, "Well," and then he said, "Mr. Race told me that." And at first I was, "Who the heck you talking?" Oh, my dad. Um, but um, so there's always champions. There's different eras. There's different whatever. But like Arnold Palmer, he is the king of golf. There's Jack Nicklaus, and there's all kinds of other people, but he's the king of golf.
Mhm.
Richard Petty is the king of automotive racing. There's and there's Mario Andretti's and there's other ones out there, but he's known as the king, Richard Petty. Right, Roger Federer, tennis, Michael Phelps, swimming. Sure, there's going to be great ones, and there's going to be maybe even a record or two broke, but they're the king of their sport, and they're all individual sports too.
Mhm.
So when he did that, the wrestlers just started. They didn't call him the king. They just started calling him king. That was it. Just he was just one, it was like Madonna or or Prince or something. He was
Yeah.
just king. King, can I get you this? King, can I do that? Do that? Every once in a while, there'd be a Mr. Race or a boss in there. So in developing my dad, in putting, I don't want to say developing, in coming to an agreement on Dad's first quote unquote gimmick, they actually propelled him into an honor, into a seat of number one that no one will ever be at.
No,
Lots of
absolutely,
champions, but only one king. And they
right,
can have other kings out there calling themselves kings,
yeah.
but they call themselves kings. They're not called by the guy as king.
No, absolutely, and I was always disappointed that when his career wound down and other people started wearing that same crown. I mean, nobody came close. I mean, and for
No.
somebody who, yeah, and for your dad who was
Well,
so synonymous.
I thought it was cool that Haku wore it though.
Yeah, yeah, but yeah, no, I mean Haku, very cool, but I mean it's just, and they even had a battle once, if you recall,
Hmm.
that was
Hmm.
left off
Yeah,
the home video.
you didn't want to get in the middle of those two.
No, 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 you definitely did not, for sure, and but it was also just interesting to watch your dad, who was so synonymous with the NWA. People were afraid of what kind of gimmick or what kind of how Vince would try to maybe change the character, change the man. I mean, the man wasn't a character; the man was the man. But because he'd made his name everywhere else and was honestly a more legitimate world champion, because he literally
Well, that's what
traveled
he
the
said.
world.
That's what he said. I've been 8-time NWA champion. I've been the champion of the Pacific, the Caribbean, the United States, Missouri, Florida. I don't need any more belts. I don't need more championships. We're just going to come up with something that puts me on another level, on another stage, another statue, pillar, so to speak. And so
Yeah.
they came up with that. And I think Vince still thought of it kind of as a gimmick until it really started to catch on. And then it just became, you know what the thing he hated most about being the king?
What's that?
As he would tell me, carrying that goddamn crown and cape around all the time.
Yeah, that'll do it. It's like
Yeah,
carrying a belt.
that crown was it was heavy and it was in a big box. And to fit on my dad's head, it wasn't, it was a big thing. Dad had the biggest head, especially
Yeah,
with the afro.
right.
Um, so he hated dragging that crown and uh
And pardon
that
the
cape.
interruption, gentlemen. I know, Justin, you already told me that these said items are in a museum. Would they ever be up for sale?
No, not for anything affordable anyway. I
Jim
mean,
Duggan, that wasn't.
I
Yeah.
well, I mean, a lot of his stuff, older things that I had of his, the belts or whatever, I gave to the museum, and I did that for a reason. I believe that the fans should be able to enjoy them and see them. They don't need to be collecting dust in my house.
It's very noble
So
of you.
I donated it. Well, I mean, that's give it
Speaking
to
of
the people.
nobility.
They're the one. Yeah, well, they're give it to the people. They're the ones. The people are the ones that put him in the position that he was by going to watch him wrestle. And um, like you go out to dinner with mom and dad, and you just sit down family dinner, talk about school or my sports or whatever. And people would come up and ask for autographs all the time. And occasionally, you get annoying to my mom or whatever. Can't they wait at least until we finish eating? And my dad always told her, Yvonne, that person paid for this meal. That person paid for the vacation you just went on. That vacation pays for the house over our head. If it wasn't for these people that come and watch me wrestle, we'd live in a tent. So
Wow.
that kind of put things in perspective. And that's kind of how I've kind of taken his legacy with me is, I have some special, mementos, personal things of mine that I keep. And people send me some things that I haven't seen in forever, like T-shirts from the 1970s. They'll send me a T-shirt, which I think is really cool, but it's not something I'm going to get rid of. I'm going to keep it
Sure.
because those are
Sure. I
little
mean,
private things between my dad and I.
yeah, I don't know if fans were under the, yeah, exactly. And I wonder if fans are under the impression that whoever took the king after, Ray, Haku took it, because people were after Jim Duggan to see if he could find out what happened to his cape and crown, and he sold it to
Yeah,
somebody, and then he bought it back from them, but it's not the same cape and crown, I guess.
no, the original one with my father's was bought by the WWE from the family.
Okay, that's good to know.
And
Great.
And
it was, and I
sorry,
would have, I mean, to tell you the
not
truth,
to
I would have given it to
interject,
you.
but has that ever been on A&E's Most Wanted Treasures?
I don't know. I can't answer that question. Possibly. But I mean, to tell you the truth, I'd have given it to them, but they offered and paid for it. So I accepted some money for it. But I mean, like I said, all that kind of stuff, all these, I mean, I just got, here, I'll show you something. Huh. Mattel just sent me this.
Oh my gosh.
Oh wow!
That's
Look
the
at
one
that.
with Muhammad Ali and Gorilla Monsoon on the back.
Oh my goodness! Wow.
Yeah. And I
Wow,
mean, I have, they
is
didn't
that a
just send me
prototype?
one.
It's a
What's
prototype,
that?
or is it a prototype?
No, Mattel, it's not. You can go on Mattel Creations website and buy them.
Hmm.
Oh,
But actually, I should say the WWE sent me those. Mattel didn't.
yeah.
Um, but I mean, they just didn't send me one. But again, somehow I'll find a place for them for the people to see. I'll keep a set for myself, of course, but
Mhm.
I'll find a place for them. I'll put my autograph on them, and maybe have my mom autograph them, and put them someplace for people to see. Because
That's great.
everyone deserves to see that stuff and to look at it and to read the little placard underneath where, when, why, who, what, how. The one of the original the NWA belt, the one Dad carried in the 70s, which I think is the one in the museum, had a big dent in, where the globe was on the top. It kind of protruded, a three-dimensional globe, and
Mhm.
had a big dent in it, the stainless steel globe. And that dent came from Flair hitting my dad over the head with it.
Oh. I was
And
gonna say I could picture your dad diving, like doing a diving headbutt, and the person moving, and then
landing
him
on the belt, yeah.
landing on the belt and denting the belt.
Yeah. But the funny story though, we were back in the dressing room after that. I was sitting next to my dad, and Rick was like not facing us, but the other side of the room. And Dad turned around. He said, "Ricky, you hit me with that goddamn belt one more time, I'm gonna cram it up your ass." So that ended up using the belt as a weapon, at least against my dad.
Well, why not? Better than a sledgehammer, right, David?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, Triple H, or Triple O, as you like to call him, Alan. He loves said sledgehammer.
Yeah.
Well, he's not Peter Gabriel to me, though. So that's it.
Oh, and
Good.
you always got
That was
a
pretty good.
one-liner that's going to amaze me and as well as our guests.
Well, thank you, and I probably did get down and bow when Harley and Bobby Heenan said, get down and bow before the king. I probably did a few times as a kid. I was
There was
intimidated
quite a few.
looking.
There was a couple of
Well,
fans
if
out there
Bobby
that did that.
Heenan,
I
if the
remember that.
Weasel told you to do it, you do it.
Well, yeah, I mean, I wasn't going to be locking lips with Rick Rude and kissing him, but I would bow for Harley Race. Yeah.
Absolutely, as would I. I'll hail the king. And
Exactly.
I know a lot of you all say the King Harley Race was a rib. Yes, I agree.
Wow.
I agree. It's a rib. But Harley Race was in your father, Justin, was in the twilight of his career. And, what better place to end said career in the biggest promotion known to man, the WWF? And I'm
Well,
not
that's why.
sure. I'm not sure how much money he made, but I'm sure Vince McMahon made your dad filthy effing rich.
I did okay.
Well, I mean,
He
rib or
did
not,
okay.
I mean, but I mean, he had to be
Well, that's
something.
why
I
I
mean,
say it started kind of as a gimmick, but after it kind of caught on and he just became the king. Now, the guys that held that crown after him, Haku and whatever, Some people will call him King Haku or whatever, but for the most part, the people just call him Haku. Guys call him Haku.
Mm.
Long after my dad didn't have that crown anymore, long after he was Vader's manager, long after any of that stuff, he'd still walk into a dressing room anywhere in the world, and they was referred to as king.
Well,
Yep.
because he was the king. He didn't have to wear a cape and a crown to be known as the king because, again, I'm 40 years old. Alan and Justin, you're much older than I am,
Well,
but
thank you.
Thanks.
we've
Yeah, I feel good, man.
watched your father's matches, and by God Almighty, he doesn't need a cape or a crown to be known he's the king because he's the very best at what he ever did in the world of professional wrestling. And even as a 40-year-old, I still love and always loved what your father did. Always loved it,
Yeah,
even
well,
though I never dream of being a professional wrestler. But I always take the Harley Race mentality of what would Harley Race do?
well, he was not only the best, one of the best wrestlers ever, technical brawler, however you want to call him, but he also had the ability to make other people look good.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
There, there was always a saying in the dressing room or wherever that my dad can make a broomstick look like a good wrestler.
Oh, absolutely. I
And
mean, I
he,
can remember. Sorry, go ahead.
no, go
I
ahead.
got nothing to say.
Oh, I was going
Just
to say no, but I mean, I can remember times when guys who usually had very mediocre matches like Junkyard Dog and Hillbilly Jim and George the Animal Steel, they'd get in with Harley and it would be like like a classic. And I'm like, okay, that's got to
Yeah.
be Harley. I mean, no offense
Well,
to those three men.
well, no, he took pride in that. When he would come home, he wrestled in the better part of a decade, the 60s and 70s and 80s. He wrestled 300 plus days a year. He traveled another 2 or 3 weeks of that year. So being home was not very often. But when was home, we would we'd load up the van, mom, dad, and I, and we would drive to every little one horse town in Kansas and Missouri and Nebraska, Iowa, Oklahoma, Arkansas, with anything that was within 6, 8 hours. And we'd drive there to the smallest little town you can think of, town of 400 people, and 399 of them would be at the wrestling match. And he would wrestle their hometown boy. And he'd let their hometown boy beat the you know what out of him for 58 minutes. And then right at the end, he'd come back and he'd win. And the moral of the whole point of the story is when he left that little town of 400 people, their local guy had come this close from beating the world champion.
Yeah, that's
And
where. Yeah,
that, pro- that propelled a lot of careers. Some of those, local heroes from these little towns ended up breaking into the business and doing well just because he gave him that opportunity to beat him up for 58 minutes.
absolutely. That's what a guy from here, Jacques. I don't know if you're familiar with Jacques Rougeau of the Rougeau brothers.
Mhm.
Yeah, so he had told stories of like going down to those areas and he said that guys like Ric Flair and I'm sure Harley, they didn't want to just beat the stuffing out of him for 5 minutes because then what did they do? But if by making him look good for 10, 20 minutes or 58 minutes and then coming back at the
Yeah.
end and said, boy, you really beat somebody. Oh, you came so close and now we're going to look at you differently. So the ability to make other people was a real gift and a real talent for sure.
hmm
Yeah.
Well, and Dad was very, very firm on making sure the fans had their money's worth. They didn't come see the rest. They didn't, he believed that the reason he went to the small towns because he believed that not just everyone in big cities should um, get to see the world champion. Everyone should see the world champion. Of course, this is back before pay-per-view and all
Yeah.
that whatnot. In order to see Harley Race wrestle, you had to be lucky enough to live in a big city that he was going to.
Sure.
And he
Sure.
tried to sorry about the sun, it happens this time of day. Um, he he didn't think that was fair. He came from a little town. Town my dad came from had 95 people when he grew up, and now it has 63. And
What
so he
happened to the
came from those
32?
he came from those yeah, he came from those roots. So yeah, he would do his best to go an hour with a broomstick, and the broomstick darn near won.
Yeah.
And the
You
wrestlers have always
yeah, sorry.
respected him for that. No, that's right. It's just the wrestlers have always respected him
Yeah.
for that. So there's more to him being called the boss, Mr. Race, or King. There's those things that people don't, think of as much. Things that he
Uh,
did for the business, only for the betterment of the business.
yeah, very selfless, absolutely. Were you aware of Tom Billington, the Dynamite Kid, his admiration for your dad?
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. And Dynamite he was fun. Guy wasn't 5'9", I think. Funny story about him. He and Dad, he was a big ripper, and Dad was a big ripper.
Oh,
And
was
a lot of
Dynamite ever? He even used to rib his own cousin, the British Bulldog.
oh yeah.
And if any of you have ever seen his A&E biography, do or don't watch it. I don't care. But Dynamite gave his cousin hot chocolate, but little did he know inside of said hot chocolate was X-Lax.
X-Lax.
And
Yeah.
Davy's starting to feel sick. And then Dynamite's like, oh, you got to have more hot chocolate.
Well, the funny
So,
thing about Dynamite is if my dad and he were in the same location or whatever, a lot of his ribs involved my father, not as the punchline, as the one he would rib got like there was this, I don't remember where we were, but the Canadian, the guy that won the strongman, the strongman competitions where they do those real awkward things, lift a car, lift a big cement ball, all
Ken
these different
Patera?
weird things, not weightlifting, but the
Oh,
strongest man on earth competition. Well, this guy was the strongest man from Canada, and he had
no,
won
not
that
Ken
event.
Patera, Alan. I know you have a
oh,
Ken
No,
Patera fetish.
yes,
God
I do. I
damn it.
do.
no,
But
not Ken
he's not
Patera.
Canadian. I know he's
God
not
damn
Canadian.
it. He's not
It was
Canadian.
Ken
And I
had
know
been in
you
the
love
business.
Ken Patera, but leave him alone.
Well, he'd been in
Oh,
the business for a
maybe
long time.
no,
This
no.
kid
Maybe
was
he means
brand
Iron
new.
Mike Sharp, Canada's greatest athlete. Was it
No,
Iron
I
Mike
don't think
Sharp,
that.
Canada's greatest
I don't
athlete, or
remember
Dino
what his.
Bravo, Bill Casman? No.
He was just the strongest man, Canada's strongest man. And he would go on to
Okay.
compete
Well,
against
Dino Bravo did
for the
use it.
other countries.
Okay.
Yeah. Anyway,
Oh,
so
oh,
he
okay.
won this competition by picking up uh, two cans, like lead cans, like a paint size can or whatever, maybe a little bigger, but they were filled with lead. They weighed 200 pounds each, and you had to grab them by your fingertips and walk with them. And so he did, and he walked however long, and he won the
Ugh.
competition. Well, he comes to break into wrestling, and strong hands to be able to do that. And Tommy got a hold of him, and he said, "Go play Mercy with Harley. Go play Mercy with Harley. Harley's got a pretty good grip, but you'll beat him. Go test out the old man." So Dynamite knew exactly what was going to happen. So he
Oh,
came over to my dad. My dad's sitting there, had, of course, a cigarette. He changed the cigarette to his right hand. He normally spoke with his left hand. And he reached up. He never stood up. He just reached up like this. And when the guy grabbed a hold of him, all you could hear was, it sounded like the cereal snap, crackle, pop. All you could hear was bones and fingers and whatever in that guy's hand just breaking as Dad
Oh,
pulled.
jeez.
Like this, and then turned him over. And as he turned him over, the guy's jumping up and down on his little tippy toes. And Dad still was in the chair and still had a cigarette in his mouth. I mean, in his hand. And so, of course, that guy was done for the night. He wasn't wrestling. Promoter got mad at Dad for breaking the guy's wrist or breaking the guy's hands and fingers, but they don't get mad at. They didn't get mad at my dad too much. My dad was the one that drew the whole house full of people they had.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's what Dynamite would do. He'd rib other people into doing things. My dad, he knew they were going to lose. he used my dad as like his comic
Foil.
relief.
Yeah, so right. Yeah. Did you ever read? I don't know if you've ever read Dynamite Kid's book, which predates all the big wrestling books, pretty much. But
Yeah, it's been
he
a while.
took
I've read it a long time ago.
right, right. Yeah, me too. But one part that definitely stood out to me is because of Tommy's incredible admiration for your dad. Did you remember a part where he was in the dressing room? He said, and the honky tonk man had the nerve to make fun of the because your dad, I think, had just gotten the abdominal injury or whatever, and
Oh yeah,
he,
yeah.
so
I
he
know.
knocked Honky Tonk right off the chair and just like, who are
Yeah,
you to put down Harley Race? Like, and I mean, Honky denies the story to this day, but Dynamite told it as fact at the
nah,
time.
it
So
happened. It
it didn't
happened.
happen.
Yeah. One thing, Dynamite almost got my dad once. He had a couple of bull mastiffs, where they lived in Canada. You know, those dogs are huge.
Yeah.
And he knew exactly where my dad lived. We lived on we had this nice home. It was like in a gated community with a private golf course and country club. But the 10th tee box was just right off of our yard. And it was against the course policy for you to put uh, any fencing up around your yard because if golfers, hit the ball into your yard, well, they had to go in and get it. And so he knew this, but he tried to talk my dad into buying the cutest little puppies. And he wanted my dad to have one of his puppies. And he knew darn good and well what he was doing because dad did end up not taking it. We had enough dogs the way it was, like smaller dogs. The dog ended up being darn near 300 pounds.
Oh.
Imagine that dog out in the backyard with golfers going by. 300-pound dog, even if he was friendly and just wagging his tail, imagine a 300-pound dog coming at you. You got to defend yourself with is a 9-iron.
Oh my God, that's great.
So he almost got dad that time.
Yeah, totally. No, it's really amazing. This is a
Great
random.
guys. Him and David. He and David boy, they're both good guys.
Yeah,
They're all
yeah.
good guys, really. I mean, back behind the scenes, they're pretty much. I've never met a jerk that I can remember. I mean, I'm sure I did, but they're
Well, I
and a lot of
can
that was who I.
I
There
can
was
I
a lot
can
of that
ad
was.
lib. I'm sorry to interrupt, but I can ad lib that the British Bulldogs were some of the worst ribbers in the WWF,
Oh yeah.
and one of the
Now you
worst.
could be a ribber and not be an asshole, though.
Yeah, that too. Like, there's again, I'm not going to go into the whole Jacques Rougeau thing. That's
Mhm.
been discussed ad nauseum, which I'm not going into. And, maybe there's a part of me that thinks the Rougeaus or Jacques deserved it. Don't hate me, Jacques. Do not hate me, yet you do. However, one rib or one prank that stood out in which Bad News Brown or Bad News Allen College stepped in and said, "Do not do this. You're going to kill someone," was where the Bulldogs were going to take a hypodermic needle full of thin air and inject someone with it. Now, for those of you people that do not know, if you do that to someone, you're going to kill someone.
Yeah, don't do that.
Jeez, yeah, don't do that.
I've told kids and even adults a lot of things not to do in my life. And just because you saw my dad do it doesn't mean you need to try.
Don't try this at
But
home. Huh? Yeah,
yeah, something like that. That's just awful. Well, you want to know like a fun. You mentioned Junkyard Dog a while ago
Mhm.
at WrestleMania 3. That was one of the first WrestleManias or first wrestling matches in general that they had other celebrities there, not like other athlete celebrities, but
Yeah.
celebrities. Bobby Euchre was there. Oh,
Aretha
I can't remember
Franklin.
her name
Yeah.
is.
Aretha Franklin was
Yeah,
there.
I don't know if it was that
Mary
four or
Hart.
three or four.
Yeah.
Mary Hart. Yeah, she was there.
Yeah.
And anyway, the Alice Cooper was with Jake, the snake. And they put them in their own dressing room because I mean, they between the two of them, there were snakes crawling around everywhere.
Jeez.
And Dad went in. JYD is deathly afraid of snakes.
I'd
So
heard
Dad
that. Yeah.
goes in there and grabs one of these snakes and throws his. I might have told you, and threw it up over his neck, and he went in back into the dressing room. And the head on the snake's, like a saucer, and JYD sitting there looking at a locker, butt naked, and Dad came over and hit him on the shoulder with the head of that snake. He saw that. JYD jumped up in the air, screamed like a little girl. And I never seen a 300-pound naked black man run so fast in my life. All the way through the dressing room, Dad running behind him, giggling, chasing him with the snake. And he chased out, and the whole dressing room was just roaring, laughing. He got him cornered in the bathroom, and I think he ended up just kind of walking out, and letting him go because JYD darn near had a heart attack. But that's the
Yeah.
ring. I spent a
I
lot of
thought that
time
I'd
in
heard that
dressing
actually.
rooms.
Yeah, I
What's
thought
that?
I'd heard that Mary Hart actually. Sorry, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Yeah, I thought I'd heard actually that Mary Hart actually, speaking of her, wound up in something like that where she saw someone like the Junkyard Dog running naked, and she wasn't expecting it coming
That's
from the
very
world
possible.
of them.
It's very possible. She might have, maybe she, I don't know, he might have ran out the door. I know he ended up in
Yeah,
the shower. Dad had
I
him cornered in the shower with a snake, but she very possibly could have seen him or seen something like that.
yeah
Like I was
yeah.
saying, I spent a lot of time in the dressing rooms because, I mean, I like to watch my dad wrestle to a certain extent. When I was young, it was way too traumatic. I mean, that's hard. I'm a little kid, 6 years old, see your dad getting hit with a chair and blood flying everywhere, and um, so I did go a lot. I went a lot, but my mom and dad kind of decided before the match, who you wrestling and what kind of match is this going to be. If it's against Abdul the Butcher, Justin and I are going to play putt putt or mini golf or something, or a movie. But if it was going to be against Briscoe or Flair to a certain extent or something like that, then we go. There was mistakes made, and like I said, the matches would get out of hand, and scare the heck out of me, and it's traumatizing for a young kid. People ask me, you could
Oh
ask
yeah.
different doctors or whatever, they'll say, did you ever have a traumatic experience happen when you were a little kid? And I'd say, well, besides watching my dad get the shit kicked out of him 5, 6 nights a week, I might have been in a car wreck.
Jeez, poor you. Yeah, that's rough.
No,
No, for
yeah.
sure.
And
The
Alan,
style
and
was.
Alan, you know this. Unfortunately, I share the same birthday as Abdullah the Butcher.
Oh, funny.
You
But
don't have
anyhow,
the
that's
same
why I
scars on
spent a
your
lot of time
forehead.
in. Yeah, really, you look a little. Your head's not quite banged up as good.
Not carved.
But that's
Not
why I
carved.
spent a lot.
Not due to wrestling, due to other damage, due to
Yeah.
manual physical labor or just stupidity.
Well, he's
Well,
Canadian,
that's
so.
why I spent a lot of time in the dressing room with Dad. I mean, I'll tell people I grew up with a whole bunch of 300 to 500 pound uncles or bigger in Uncle case. And
And
I
you,
goof around. I mean, now none of the other guys had their kids in the dressing room like my dad did. A, he was who he was, and he was a world champion, and no one's going to say anything to him, whether they minded or
sure.
not. But B, I just had fun with the guys. I mean, they taught me how to play cribbage. They taught me how to, like, when my dad would go and wrestle and I didn't want to go out there, he'd put somebody in charge of me, like as a babysitter, basically. And I just, I just like to hang out back there because those guys were just so funny. They were always doing such funny things to each other, for each other, against each other. They were just a bunch of clowns, and
Absolutely.
big clowns, big, very big clowns.
Before doing, for
So it
sure.
was,
David, when you interviewed Rene Dupree, didn't he say one of his favorite experiences was with Justin's dad?
Well, I talked to, last Friday when we talked, Justin, we talked on Messenger, and I'm sorry we couldn't go on video because I wouldn't say I was driving, but I was on the road to another appointment. But here's the thing. I remember one of the things that when I asked Rene Dupree, when I interviewed him back last October, I said, what are some of your fondest memories of when your father, Emile Dupree, was promoting his own wrestling territory, which preoccupied the Atlantic provinces, be it Prince Edward Island, Newfoundland, Nova Scotia, and New Brunswick and what have you. And Harley Race was staying at Emile Dupree's guest house. And I don't know if it was early in the morning. I know maybe I was quoted as saying early in the morning. It might have been the afternoon. Maybe I'm wrong. Rene Dupree is not here to validate said statement, but he remembers Harley Race wrestling for his father, staying at his guest house. He had a bottle of an adult beverage, whether it's whiskey, scotch, whatever his adult beverage of choice was, and he had a cigarette in his hand. Scotch. All right, there we go. It's validated.
Drink it.
It's validated.
Now we know. Knowing is half the battle.
He had a cigarette.
Well, I don't know about the story. I just know he drank scotch.
Yeah, that's what I mean. That's been validated.
Scotch. And here in Canada, we got some damn good scotch, or we can import some damn good scotch.
Yeah.
Although it's overpriced and overrated nowadays. But back in the day, it was worth
everything up there.
Well, so are a lot of pay-per-views, you know.
So he's smoking a cigarette. He's just downing a bottle of scotch, and he's like, "Hey, kid, you want to go get some ice cream? Let's go." To a young Rene Dupree. Although Rene Dupree is not in on this interview to vouch or confirm or actually validate said interaction, but that's what I remember from when I interviewed him back in October. Rene, if you ever watch this, you can edit me, you can correct me, you can insult me, you can do whatever the hell you feel you need to do, even though you didn't do the exact same for me, because when I was supposed to go live with you and Sylvain, you and your UK partner, for some reason it didn't work out. But whatever, I'm not throwing you under the bus. It's okay. It's okay. It's for the better. YouTube can be mean. Just like YouTube is going to be mean because they don't like me for whatever reason. They don't like Alan, they don't like Justin, they don't like any one of us for whatever way we look. It's going to be offensive. They don't like the flow of the conversation, but I like the way this is going. Anyway.
Well, Justin's quite handsome. I don't know.
Oh, of course. He's just as handsome. He's just as handsome as
he's telegenic. Father. He's telegenic. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, well, there you go, handsome.
And take a look at this, folks. I know, Justin, I've showed you this before.
Yeah, I like that one. I had one of those at one point. I don't know where it went.
Cost me $500. Puts a huge target on my back, but I don't regret paying it because I love your father, and I love what he's contributed to this business.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that.
And that's $500 Canadian too, right?
Yes.
Oh,
yes.
Well, then it's not that expensive, US.
I wish I had two other guests on our show that could tell you so many other Ric Flair and Harley Race stories. My God, they got some.
Good heavens.
Well, most of you who are watching this know who I'm talking about, JF LeDuc and Joe McCausey. My God, do these people have they have one encounter when it comes to Harley Race and Ric Flair. And this was back when your dad was in a wheelchair and Ric Flair was in a state he was in, and he was like, "Hey, Harley!" And just being a nature boy. I'm not gonna try to mark out or imitate the fucking guy. I mean, there's so many out there that can do. I can do it if you give me the time, but I'm not going to because it's inappropriate to do so.
Yeah.
The
Well, as
only
I
one I ever imitates because my dad, because I lived with him for 49 years. I know what he sounds like.
We all know what Ric
yeah.
Flair sounds like.
Well, I tell you, David, yeah, for sure. Before we started the interview, I was mentioning that about Harley managing the Colossal Kongs, and poor Ric Flair and Sting had the misfortune of having to work with them and I felt terrible for Harley. I was like,
Well,
this
this is
absolute legend,
yeah,
standing
but
at the
Yeah.
Alan, this was at a time when Justin's dad was having to deal with the hand that was dealt with him, which is where I want to really delve in this question because I mean I don't know it for a fact, but it's been told, it's been in the rumor and innuendo mill. Now, after your father gave up wrestling and he started managing in WCW,
Mhm.
did your dad actually dislike, despise, hate managing the likes of Leon White, Vader, or the Colossal Kongs, or Diamond Dallas Page, or Kevin Nash, Vinny Vegas at the time? What do
I
Mr.
you
really
Hughes?
liked managing.
what do you remember if your dad ever brought work home to you and said, "Oh, I don't like what I'm doing right now"?
Um, Dad enjoyed managing all those guys because, sorry, I'm trying to block the sun. Um, they all wanted to learn from it. They didn't just, oh, Harley's your manager and okay, let's go on. They're like, oh crap, you know, Harley's my the boss is my manager. I'm going to be learning something here. Vader was a different story. Vader was so doggone strong and so doggone mean and get out of hand. Not mean in a personal nature, but once he got in the ring, just so much adrenaline took over that he was hurting people.
Yeah.
And so Dad, more often than not, with
Well,
Vader, yes, he would guide Vader a lot, but and oftentimes he would basically get in the way, you know how managers do, get in the match and not supposed to be involved in the match, but he was more getting involved to save the other guy's life.
I see.
Now
well,
he'd make it
yeah.
look like, he'd make it look, maybe Vader would have him in a corner or whatever, and Dad would grab him by the ankles and pull him out of the ring. But he wasn't pulling him out of the ring because he wanted to beat on the guy. He was pulling him out of the ring to get him away from Vader.
Well, that was Sting. I saw him do that with Sting numerous times in '92 for sure.
Yeah.
'93 for sure. I didn't know.
Funny
I didn't know
story
what they
about
were doing. Yeah.
Funny story about Leon. When after I graduated from college, I went to university in Japan, and I'd been there for 6, 7 months or whatever, and I found out that there was going to be a tour coming through, a wrestling tour coming through, and Bubba was going to be there, and I found out Leon was going to be there. Now, Leon and I, since Dad was managing Leon, we traveled around a lot together, so I get to know the man really well. Very nice guy. Well, I went to the matches there in big auditorium or big stadium in Japan, and I could speak enough Japanese to explain to the people who I was and to go get one of the office boys. So the ticket people or whatever. So they went going to get one of the office boys. The office boys came back. They looked at me and they're like, in Japanese, you look just like your father. And I said, yeah, a lot of people tell me that. And he said, come in, come in, come in. So I went in and I didn't have a ticket. I didn't, I wasn't going to sit down in the seat. I just wanted to go back in the back of the room and say hi to some of the American guys that were there and to see Bubba. I had known Bubba since I was a little bitty boy, Uncle Bubba and Aunt Matoko. That was Bubba's wife.
Mhm.
So I went back there and Leon looked at me, what the hell are you doing here? And I go to school here. He's like, you got to be kidding me. And I said, no, I go to school here. He's like, we're going to have fun. So he gets one of the office boys to go out and get us a case of beer while he's in the dressing room to drink that while he's in the dressing room because they have to have a special cab for him in Japan. This is back in the mid 90s, and there was only a couple different cabs in the city that he could ride in. unless they tried to get him a bus. So
Mhm.
we sat, drank beer, and the cab finally got there, and we went out. We went from one bar to another, and all kinds of stuff that I'm not even going to mention. And finally, about 3 in the morning, got back to his hotel room. We decided it was a good idea to call my father. So Leon, Harley, what are you doing? What the hell do you want, you big fat son of a bitch? Someone else say hi to you. Because Dad knew he was in Japan. He and I said, "Hey, Dad, what the hell are you doing there? God damn it, Vader! You're corrupting my son. He's supposed to be going to college, and you're taking him, you're getting him all drunk." So we listened to him yell at us for a little bit, and we hung up the phone. Boy, Leon and I had a good laugh over that one. That was pretty.
Oh, that's great. That's fantastic. And what a legend your dad was in Japan too, all over the place, New Zealand, everywhere.
Yeah, he
Pretty-
wrestled. He's the only champion to ever wrestle on every continent except Antarctica.
That's right. And if anyone could have, yeah, exactly. That's it.
Yeah, if he'd have found some sort of walrus or whatever to wrestle, he'd wrestle. But yeah,
Yeah,
he
exactly.
had a grueling schedule. In fact, it was so bad. Well, I say bad, but it was such a rigorous schedule that a lot of the promoters, be it Sam Mushnick here in Kansas City, or
Mhm.
Graham down in Florida, or Bubba Shonai Bubba, Giant Bubba in Japan, or uh, Peter Maivia, or whatever, the promoters, they knew that they were running him so ragged. And not only that, but he was running himself ragged because, yeah, they had him wrestling over 300 days of the gym of the year, but he didn't have to go an hour every night. He did that on his own.
Hmm.
So the promoters were very kind, and they usually, when I was younger, and when it didn't matter if you missed a month of school or something, the promoters would uh, purchase tickets so that my mom and I could fly with him and travel with him, and pay our hotel room bills and meals and stuff like that. So I always have to say they were very gracious and kind about that. Because they knew that he wouldn't last if he's not going to be. His dad was a very family oriented man, and if he wasn't going to ever get to see his family, then he wasn't going to last that long as a champion.
Hmm.
And they wanted him to last long because he did draw such a crowd. I've never in my life seen people hate someone so much that they pay money to see him.
Yeah, and Canada's no exception. I mean, your dad even lost the world title or won the world title in Toronto in
Yeah,
'77, right here. And Canadians loved him in Calgary and Toronto, certainly here in Montreal for sure.
he was the what do you call it, Grand Master or something of the Calgary Stampede one year.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I think it's something called like that. Yeah, yeah. The head man.
I,
Yeah, something like that.
yeah, he was the Grand Master or whatever. Like, ceremonial. He didn't run anything or know how anything was
Yeah,
done. But
yeah.
like being a co-chairman or co-sponsor of like a uh, multiple sclerosis society or whatever. You don't have anything to do with the treatments or whatever. You just come to speak
Mhm.
to draw the crowds to get the people to donate the money to the fund. So
Right, right. No, absolutely, for sure. This is a sort of a random thing I'm going to say that I remember when I was in that early period, and I loved your dad's matches. I remember there was a Coliseum. You remember Coliseum home video, the old WWF VHS releases,
oh
and
yeah.
yeah,
Oh wow, yeah.
there was a famous one that was focused on specialty matches. And I was watching your dad wrestle Hulk Hogan. I think it was in Madison Square Garden in some kind of Texas death or no disqualification match. And then they followed it up with a rematch in Boston. And I'm looking at it very confused because the Boston match seemed absolutely identical to the match just about that came right before it. And I was like, wow, how did that happen? And it turns out that the guy who put the videos together Back then, it was a lot more like the Wild West, and he lost his job
Yeah.
over that. They fired him. They said you can't expose on a video to all these that they had the exact same match, one right after the other.
Yeah. That's
It
funny
was-
to think that guy was fired. Jeez, what a weirdo.
yeah,
Um,
yeah.
yeah, the technology and the way it matches are presented nowadays, it's very foreign. I'm getting used to it, but it's very foreign to me. I have kids all the time come up and they figure out who my dad is or whatever because I look like him. Um, your dad's my favorite wrestler. How old are you? 25. You weren't even born when my dad retired. How the heck do you know? How did you know of my dad even? Unless him being your favorite wrestler. Oh, YouTube.
I'm kind of in the
And I'm
same
like, wow.
situation. I'm kind of
Yeah,
in
you're
the same
40. You know what I'm talking
situation,
about.
but then again, when I meet older wrestlers and they say, "How in the hell do you know my matches?" I'm 40
Yeah.
years old, not to disclose my age, but I just did. But it's called
Again,
due to YouTube, due to videotape, due to whatever media or whatever availability there is to watch said matches of your career. I will watch them if I am a fan of what your work is.
Hmm. Oh, I'll
yeah.
have, yeah, this same 25-year-old kid will pretty much move for move describe a match between my dad and Dory Funk Jr. in 1974. And the kid is 20 years old. How, I admire their devotion to the sport, and it's made my dad as popular or more popular maybe than he's ever been. Because people have what I want to say, they have the choice of watching what's on TV, WWE, what's on TV. I heard a guy called the other day, he called it Cirque du Soleil Wrestling. Um, like
Which
a
it
big
is,
acrobat
which
show.
it is.
And then
Not gonna
they
lie,
also,
it
but they
is.
have the opportunity nowadays to watch my dad and watch Terry and Dory Funk and Briscoes, whatever. They have the advantage of seeing or the opportunity to see that older wrestling. And I'm
yeah,
just dumbfounded on the amount of people that gravitate toward the old wrestling and away from the acrobatic, high flying whatnot that they do on TV now.
yeah.
Well,
Because
I have
it's not real. It's
sorry, Alan, sorry to
nothing's even
interrupt
started to
you,
be
but
real anymore.
I have a bit of a
No.
follow-up question to ask Justin.
Uh-huh.
As far as modern wrestling, are there any athletes or any aspiring wrestlers that you see, whether it's the indie scene, whether it's WWE, AEW, TNA, or Ring of Honor, or any athlete where you say these guys really are tradition? They are the holder of the emblematic wrestling style that your father brought to us.
Two names come to mind: CM Punk, and I mentioned him earlier, Randy Orton.
Fantastic, fantastic.
That's the two
And
guys that I can.
another
That's still,
name,
and
I have another
they're still
name I
the kind
want
of
to
guys
bring
that
to
tell
mind.
Harley stories in the dressing rooms.
Yeah, exactly.
Of
CM
course.
Punk is a huge fan of your dad. Oh my God, yeah.
Of course. What about a guy by the name of Timothy Thatcher, if you've ever heard of him?
I've heard of him, not real familiar, but I've heard of him. I've heard of all the guys. I mean, when there's a show in town, sometimes I'll go with Kansas City up to the T-Mobile Arena, and again, I'll go to the back, and bodyguards will realize who I am. They just let me in.
Hmm.
Not as much lately. Um, 5, 10 years ago, I did, but I've been so pleasantly surprised by the impact that older wrestlers and older wrestling is having, even on the younger population. That I find it not as I'd rather do a podcast with a bunch of guys talking about old school wrestling than I
Yeah.
would go to an event downtown to watch Monday Night Raw or whatever. It doesn't really interest
Well, that makes three of us.
me.
No, for sure. I don't know if you
That
want.
makes three
I don't know
of
if you
us.
wanted to mention. Right. I don't know if you
What's
wanted to
that?
talk about Timothy Thatcher, but I have a comment to make too. But David, you want to finish what you were saying before? Or
Right.
you're
I
just
was gonna say I had a question for the three of you, and if ever I do
three
a
of them?
broadcast wrestling panel or a broadcast panel with how many people, I just got to ask this question because it's just been engraved in my brain, and you each have your own individualistic answers. There's no right or wrong answer. When was the pivotal or defining moment where both of you became disgusted, let alone disenfranchised with the state of what's called professional wrestling or sports entertainment?
I'd almost say I mean, like even WrestleMania 3, and that was it, and the Pontiac Silverdome, it was almost 100,000 people there. That was pretty cool. I would say I don't know when this was or what happened when they changed their name, and I know they had to for legal reasons. When they changed their name from the World Wrestling Federation to the World Wrestling Entertainment. The minute they stuck that name on their brand,
Yeah,
all bets were off. Then after that, I was just like, ugh. And
that's
that's when they really started doing a lot of the skits and the storylines. And I remember somewhere around the 9/11 to 2001 era,
yeah.
when the big thing was hunting terrorists around. I remember, yeah, I don't know if I saw it or heard it or whatever, but Stephanie McMahon was kidnapped by terrorists, and I was like, okay, that's it. This has absolutely nothing to do with wrestling, and I want nothing to do with it. My
Yeah.
dad had quit long before that. He had his own school, and I enjoyed going down to my dad's wrestling school and showing him how. I mean, he used me as a test subject sometimes because I know how to do the moves too. And when he got a little older and couldn't, I he had trainers, of course, but every time I went down to visit him, he'd always want me to get in the ring with one of his trainers, and we wouldn't wrestle like fists and punches and stuff, but we'd collegiate wrestle. I was a state champion, national champion many times in collegiate wrestling, and
Hmm.
I'd always be his trainers. So, but yeah, during that time when he was developing his school and developing the niche that his school was, the shut up and wrestle, he'd say, I'll teach you how to wrestle. You go up to New York and learn how to be a movie star. And so that was right around the time when they changed the name. They had to change the name from WWF to WWE, and all
Mhm.
of that kind of coincided at once. And that was enough for me.
Well, due to the long withstanding lawsuit between the other WWF, the one with the
Yeah,
panda
the
bear,
World
fund.
Wildlife Fund.
Yeah.
They've been around a few years longer.
Well, yeah, maybe. But I was going to say earlier that Matt, was I supposed to answer the question too, David? Because you faded out for a
Oh
bit.
yeah, I mean, I know you're bitter. I mean, Alan, I've known you for the better part of 3 years,
Yeah.
and I think I've gotten to know your bitterness and jadedness when it comes to the world of modern day wrestling, going back to the quote unquote attitude era or the Vinny
Yeah.
Rubro era. But
Yeah.
what was the pivotal defining moment where you said enough's enough, I can't stand this crap no more?
Um. I well. Well, I can honestly say even when I too stopped going to live shows when I couldn't take it anymore. The last one I could stand was in early '98. I mean, you had TV skits with people breaking into people's houses with guns. Like, what was that doing on a wrestling show? You had
Oh,
uh,
Pillman's got a gun. Yeah, we
ah,
all
I
remember
was like,
that.
oh, it was cringe.
Unfortunately.
Yeah, and then they started doing things like when Brian unfortunately passed away, when they had his widow on the next night, and
Mhm.
I mean, just using sleazy tabloid television as they got away from like another legend, Bill Watts, a much more controversial legend. said when wrestling had mystique and danger, people would come out in droves to see it. When you took away the mystique and danger, and it's obvious that you're not really doing simulated combat anymore, now you're doing like the ballet, the Cirque du Soleil performance art.
Yeah.
Obviously, there's no danger involved. Everybody's cooperating with everybody. They're even telling you how they did it, and sometimes even breaking down their own performance because it's only a performance now. I mean, I just
I
couldn't
got
take it. I'm like,
10-foot ladders. They've got
yeah,
10-foot ladders in the ring, and it's
yeah,
when they were using a foreign object back in my dad's era, it was either they moved a fan, they picked up a little old lady and moved her and took her metal chair and hit each other
yeah,
with it, or they used the
yeah.
belt, or they used the ring bell, or it was, they didn't have a ladder brought in by a bunch of bouncers for a match. I mean, the only exception I would think would be like cage matches and things like that.
Yeah.
But they didn't bring the foreign objects into the ring.
No, no. And it's always conveniently under the ring sometimes. Like, how did it
Yeah,
get there? Why did they play the
but at
music
least,
of the other?
well, but that goes back to the mystique, though. You don't know when and
Yeah.
where that was going to happen. It's kind of hard to hide a 10-foot ladder bringing it out into the crowd.
No, it is pretty much. It is. And exactly, it got so far away in that sense. So I guess, I attended, speaking of Monday Night Raw, I went down to Lake Placid, New York to attend a Monday Night Raw, and I hated it. Like, this was the first time I'd ever done it, and it was almost the last time I'd ever done it, because you could see that they were getting so far away from what it used to be, and
Mhm.
shifting a whole new paradigm of this idea that this is just a television show. It doesn't really matter. There are no real enemies. We're all just, putting on it
It's a
totally,
circus.
yeah, it went from an arena spectacle to just another television show.
Yeah,
And I hated that. I really hated that. TV as
I
much as
agree.
cable TV, yeah, it's just. And I thought it was a slap in the face to your dad, to Bruno Sammartino, to any of them, even Eddie Graham,
Yeah,
all of them, in a way.
times change, things move on. Like I said, Dad was made the king for a reason, and it turned out to be a lot bigger reason than Vince had planned. And uh, things are going to move on. I mean, you look back in the 1970s at running backs in the NFL, and now you look to today, and they're like, I only get to carry the ball 20, 30 times a game. You're going to throw the rest of the time. Things just evolve,
Yeah,
and
but
and you can fight it, you can go with it, or you can just quit and say, I'm done with this.
yeah, but I also put forth the theory that that's fine. Things evolve, but sometimes they also de-evolve, and people don't notice that they're actually doing more harm than good. I mean, the harm that's been done to the wrestling industry, which is what nobody talks about much, has
I
been
think that you're
irreparable.
correct, except you could take that point one step further. That's why old school wrestling is becoming so popular.
Yes,
They've
yes.
ruined the brand. They've ruined the sports on it, so to speak, and with the WWE and WWF. And now I got 20-year-old kids coming up and telling me what happened in a match with my father and Ric Flair
Right.
40 years before they were born.
Exactly. And that's why I was going to say earlier that before the technology became so easy to do that, what we were doing in the late 80s is we started the underground tape trading phenomenon. We were trading VHS copies
Mhm.
of matches. That's where I first saw your dad wrestle Dory Funk in the 70s, was when we were trading VHS tapes before streaming, before DVDs. We were
That
sending
is on a
videotapes in the
Super
mail.
8. Yeah,
What's that? Yeah, it
I
was
got one
awesome.
of the Super 8 tapes. Yeah.
Oh yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. Yeah.
Alan, do you
Yeah,
still
thank
have
you.
copies of said VHS tapes?
I do, but I actually decided to evolve, quote unquote, and I transferred the material to DVD.
It's a
But I still
DVD.
have, yeah, there's another
I
antiquated
have the
technology.
originals. I have all the originals of the original Super 8s and the original VCRs and whatever, but I have converted them to, well, I mean, a whole box full of Super 8 and VHS tapes fit on a thumb drive now.
That's right. That's right. But I was also worried that the analog videotape could degrade over time, and you might actually lose,
You
what's on
should
them, or
store it
they might.
properly. Yeah, it should store
Yeah,
it properly.
it
What
should.
properly is, I don't know, but that's what I've been told.
Oh no, yeah, and I have the material. I cherish the material. I don't care what's available online. I mean, I love what's available online. The ease with and to get to see these 20-year-old kids getting excited over it is great. But no, I will never part with the original material, at least to have a copy of it, because I mean, there's some stuff on there that's rare that was never released online or on DVD.
Sure.
Things that, yeah, in the
That's true.
80s and sure and stuff. Yeah, so it's precious to me, and it's just stuff. It's the foundation of the nucleus of the fandom, becoming super fandom, then becoming a renegade journalist. By the way, Abdullah the Butcher, David knows, was the worst experience I've ever had meeting a pro wrestler. No.
I never met the guy, so what can I tell you?
I was
You
just
have
with
the
him a couple of
story.
months ago. He's
Yeah.
a funny guy.
Oh yeah, yeah. He didn't appreciate what I was doing because he's not because he didn't like me. He just said like, "What are you doing? Like, how can you if you can't make like how you make money off doing this thing? Like, if you can't make money, what the hell are you doing? This is all about making money." And I said, "Well, with all due respect, sir, this is a labor of love. I'm not doing this to make large amounts of money. It's because I revere and honor and respect all of you." So he just like, because I was giving away copies of my newsletter to some of them, and some people, including Haku, was probably the nicest I'd ever met. Haku is one of the absolute
He's a very
nicest.
nice guy.
Yeah,
He's a very
yeah,
nice guy.
for sure.
In
And
fact,
this is
last time I saw him was a couple months ago in St. Louis, and it was the first time I'd seen him in quite some time. I was about 20 feet away from him, and he looked and he kind of cocked his head, looked again, and then he just big smile and laughing and whatever. And by that time, I'd worked my way up to him. I said, "Hey, Haku, good to see you again. What's so funny?" He said, "Just for a brief moment, how it's impossible, but for just a brief moment, I thought you were your father."
wow. Yeah, all
Uh,
right. I can see it,
uh,
even though
all
you're
right.
small
As
on my
do
screen.
I. As do I.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
He's old
Dad
for us.
had me by about 50 pounds.
And a couple of bottles of scotch, probably too.
Yeah.
Oh,
All
that's
right,
awesome.
guys.
Yeah.
Want to do this again sometime?
Oh, absolutely. One of these things that I'd like to do, Justin. I don't know if you kept or if your dad kept itineraries or itineraries of his wrestling schedule back in the day. I would love to do one of these things where it's a year in the life of your father, Harley Race. I don't
Well, you
know
can
if you
probably
have
find most of the
such
old wrestling
said
cards
or such
online.
documentation available.
No, but
Uh,
Justin's right though. A lot of that is available online too. I mean,
oh yeah, it's
It
easily
everywhere's
available.
is.
online.
I've got the program over there of the night that my dad won the seventh title from Flair.
Oh
Keel
wow.
Auditorium,
That would that
June
would be
10th,
fantastic.
1983.
That
Somebody, a wrestling fan sent it to me. He's like, "Hey, I have this. Do you want it?" I'm like, "Oh, all right, sure."
that would be fantastic. Now, before we all sign off and go our separate ways, I know, Justin, we talked about this offline this past Friday. Now,
Hmm.
you as well as your mother have two books, maybe two becoming one book become available.
It's
Tell
still
us,
in.
tell us a bit about what's going on as far as the writing and the publishing, and what can wrestling fans expect once said books or book gets released.
Well, writing a book is a lot bigger challenge than I thought. But we're working with publishers. My mom has a memoir written about her and my father's life together. The good, the bad, the ugly, what it was like to her book. I think the title's going to be Living with the King.
Hmm,
Um,
nice.
but she kind of a historical memoir of her and my dad together and her life as well. My book, on the other hand, is I've always been, my dad was always a funny person, and I've always had a good sense of humor. My book is called Don't Tell Your Mother, and it's exactly about what it sounds like it would be about. All the things that my dad and I did when I was on the road with him or whatever, wherever we were. And we'd do some sort of mischievous thing, and he's like, "Don't tell your mother." And it's something I think people can relate to. Everyone's probably had a dad or a mama or something with it, don't tell your dad. Um, so yeah, it's a compilation of just hundreds and hundreds of stories of mine that usually end up like that. I mean, there'll be some serious things in the book and some other things, but for the most part, that's what it's about, is me telling stories about my dad and I. I told you this one, David. And then I got to get off. Um, Rick, my dad had in 1970s. My dad had an old Jeep Wagoneer, and I was always full time 4-wheel drive. But in the glove box, there was a switch that you switch it to red, and that was emergency. I mean, all four tires pulled at the same time, not power tire, whatever. All four of them pulled. It's like a tank. Used to knock over trees with it, and not like big trees, but Um, well, Rick Flair really liked my dad, so Dad sold it to him. But Dad liked it also, so he bought a new one. So we were in Somerville, Carolinas, and we're leaving the Masters one night. Rick jumps into his new Jeep. He's all proud of it. My dad and I get into ours, and we leave. And we pull it just a little ways up, and there's a stoplight there. And we stop at the stoplight. Dad stops behind him, and he looks over at me. I wonder how much power this thing has. So he went up and touched bumpers with Flair and pushed him through the intersection. And tires screeching and blue smoke going everywhere. Well, police officers saw this. So he comes roaring up behind us. And they both stop, and Rick gets out of his Jeep, Dad gets out of his Jeep, they start walking toward the officer. The officer realizes who he had to stop, and his jaw drops to the ground, and he's just staring there dumbfounded. Finally, he gets on the radio and starts calling for backup. Well, the backup wasn't to help him make an arrest or anything. The backup was he wanted all of his buddies to come get autographs. So pretty soon, we're surrounded by police cars. There's police cars everywhere. It looked like, a huge traffic accident or some, wreck or something had happened. It was just police cars everywhere, and Dad and Rick in the middle, all these guys signing autographs. So this went on for a while. They let us go, of course, without any tickets or anything. So Rick got in his Jeep and Dad got in his Jeep, and we started to pull away. And Dad looked over at me. Don't tell your mother.
Oh, that's great.
And when I do podcasts nowadays, or I'm writing stories for my book, I'll write something down. And I'll tell her about it, and she's like, "You guys did what?"
Even to this very day.
I'm 53. I'm 53 years old. You guys did what when you were how old? So,
Well, at least you didn't tell your mother until years later.
yeah. So,
When you
buddy told
turned
me
out
to
great.
tell my mom, so I didn't.
That's it. A faithful son to
So
the
anyway,
end.
that's kind of a little bit of a synopsis, a general synopsis of the books. Whether it's going to be melded into one book, whether we're writing individual, we're working with the publisher. Would like to have something out by this fall, but I'm not sure. But I will definitely keep you posted.
Much appreciated.
They'll be fun to read.
Much appreciated. As much as I appreciate both you gentlemen, Alan, we've been doing this for the better part of 3 years, for better or worse. And Justin, thank you for taking almost an hour and a half out of your day for taking the time to talk to an absolute unknown or unknowns like the both of us. But the fact of the matter is, your father means the world to both of us. He was the quintessential professional wrestler. And if I ever were to get into professional wrestling, and someone
Yeah.
were to say to me,
And
who is someone you look up to, it would be your father, Harley Race,
thank
Undoubtedly,
you. I really
absolutely.
appreciate that.
among many
Alan, you
others,
too.
but Harley Race would be one of them. Because even though he was bestowed as being the king in the WWF, and you could argue that's a rib, he really was the king of the world at what he did, and he did not need a crown or a cape to do so because his work stood for itself.
Well, thank
Totally.
you, Dave. I really appreciate that.
A great honor and a privilege, Justin. Thank you so much. Great to meet you.
Alan, yeah, the honor and pleasure is all mine, guys. I I mean, it's fascinating, and it's my honor really that people want to hear about what my dad did, what about his life, and want to hear about all the little funny stories that happened outside the ring when it was just him and me goofing around.
They want to
So,
hear. They
the honor,
definitely want to hear.
We'd
yeah,
love to
so
hear
the pleasure and
more.
the honor is all mine, and I
More.
thank you a lot, and Dave, keep in touch with me or Alan, either way.
Yeah,
And
we'll
if
do it.
we want to do this again
Well,
sometime, we'll do it
let's
again.
let's
It'd be
both
great.
of us stay in touch. Let's all of us stay in touch with one another because I
Let's
think
do
we've
it.
each established one another's trust and credibility.
I agree. I agree.
Thank you. Thanks
So
again
get
so
back in
much.
touch
And
with me anytime. Oh, absolutely, Alan. Have a nice
yeah,
evening.
Have
you
a
too.
nice evening, everybody. Thank you all for watching
Oh, and
this
thank you
week's
all out there
episode.
in TV land. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Enjoy it.
That- That's
My
Justin
contact
Race,
information
everybody.
is very easily. Yeah, my contact information is very easy on Facebook or whatever. My name is Justin Race.
That's a great name for
Easy
wrestling
as
and in life. So there you go.
Thank
Have a good
you. Thank you so much,
All right.
Justin. Thank you, everybody, for who will be tuning in. And thank you all. It's been an incredible interview, and I'm so glad that things went the way they did.
for sure.
Absolutely.
Thanks again.
Thanks,
We'll see you next
everybody.
time. Take
Have a
care.
nice evening.
Yourselves a good night.
You too. Good night.
Take care of
Good night.
yourselves and each other. Love one another.
You got it, bud.